الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ما يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, and we're still discussing hadith that relates to Nawaqil al-Wudu. So we're still within the chapter of Kitab al-Tahara. That's the general book that we're studying, and in specific we're discussing the chapter or the topic of Nawaqil al-Wudu, things that nullifies one wudu. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned several hadith in this chapter, so we'll be discussing today bi'idhnillahi ta'ala hadith number 11. So the 11th hadith in this group of hadith that the author rahimahullah have mentioned relating to matters of Nawaqil al-Wudu. So we'll have the hadith read, and then we'll start to go through the hadith regarding the ahkam and different things that can be taken from the hadith. Tafaddal.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Hadith 72, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Bakr radiallahu anhu. The book written by Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam for Amr bin Hazm also contained none except a tahir person should teach the Quran, reported by Malik as Mursal, missing a link in the chain after the Tabi'i, and by An-Nisa'i ibn Hibban as Mawsul, unbroken chain, and it is graded as Ma'lul.
So that's the hadith that have been mentioned or translated. So the hadith that have been to be discussed, the hadith as Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned, and Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr rahimahullah, أن في كتاب الذي كتبه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لعمر بن هزم أن لا يمس القرآن إلا طاهر، رواه مالك مرسلا وصله النسائي وابن حبان وهو معلول الحديث. So that's the discussion that the author rahimahullah, this hadith that the author rahimahullah mentioned. So as we will go to the normal process regarding how we look at the hadith, so the first of those things to be discussed is regarding the sahabi who have narrated this hadith. So as for the sahabi that you have mentioned here, who is Abdullah, or the narrator of this hadith, he mentioned an Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr, and this is not a sahabi. So the name that is mentioned here is not a sahabi, rather is a tabi'in. So they mentioned that the narrator here that they mentioned was Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Amr ibn al-Hazm al-Ansari al-Madani al-Qadi. So this narrator, that his ancestors, that they go back to Sahaba, but as for the narrator here that has been mentioned, Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr is a tabi'i. So they mentioned that tabi'i, as mentioned by Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, that is a tabi'i, rahimahullah, thika, abid, that is said to be a person who is thika, a credible narrator, and also an abid, a person known for his devotion in worship. Then I mentioned Rahu lahu Jama, and I mentioned those who have narrated upon this narrator. That's concerning this particular narrator. So this concerning as for the sahabi that Amr ibn Hazm al-Ansari as-Sahaba. Amr ibn Hazm al-Ansari as-Sahabi. So that's concerning what have been mentioned regarding the narrator of this particular hadith. Then as for other matters that to be discussed, where the author rahimahullah, when he mentioned the hadith, Allah yamassa al-Quran illa tahir. So that's the nas of the hadith, or what is mentioned, as mentioned, أن في كتاب الذي كتبه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لأمر ibn Hazm. So this is a letter that was written by the Prophet alayhi salam, and it was given to Amr ibn Hazm to be taken, as I mentioned, to Ahl Yemen. And in this letter, it contains certain matters, of those matters that it contained regarding this instruction relating to not touching the Quran except for those who are tahir. But also in this letter that was sent, that it contained matter regarding ahkam sadaqa, regarding concerning zakat, regarding al-ghanam. So it contained concerning matters relating to certain ahkam regarding zakat. So that's the letter that was sent by the Prophet ﷺ to the people of Yemen, and the letter was taken by Amr ibn Hazm. So as for the takhrij of the hadith, the next matter regarding takhrij of this hadith, that they mentioned that also after they mentioned regarding concerning that they mentioned regarding concerning takhrij of the hadith, that the author rahimahullah mentioned rawahu Malik mursalan, that hadith is narrated by Imam Malik rahimahullah mursalan, mursal. So Imam Malik rahimahullah narrated his hadith in his book Al-Muwatta. As for the isnad of the hadith, he mentioned mursal. Mursal is a terminology that is used by the ulama of hadith in describing a certain type of hadith by way of the isnad. And those type of hadith of mursal is a hadith where the isnad is not complete. So it is a incomplete isnad where there are certain narrators that are missing. So in this isnad of mursal, that what is meant is from direction of the Prophet ﷺ, the narrators close to the Prophet ﷺ, some are missing. So the narrators that are closer to the Prophet ﷺ, that some of them are missing. So they mentioned mursal, meaning in the Mustalah ulama hadith, is a tabi'i narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ. So a mursal is a tabi'i. So you find is a tabi'i narrating upon the Prophet ﷺ. So within that, it shows that isnad, it is not complete. So it's a disconnected or incomplete isnad, and so there is a breakage inside of isnad. So mursal amongst ulama of hadith is considered to be hadith which is da'if. So mursal is a description or a term used by the ulama of hadith indicating that a breakage occurred in the isnad from a certain point of the isnad, but also that will be a reason for the hadith to be considered to be weak. That's a reason for the hadith to be labeled or graded as weak. Then I mentioned, so Imam Malik rahimahullah in his Muwatta, when he narrates this hadith, that it is mursal. So mursal, then they mentioned that wasalahu, then they mentioned Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned wasalahu Nasa'i wa Ibn Hibban wa huwa ma'lum. So they mentioned regarding concerning that this hadith, that as explained, the hadith in the Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah, mursalan, also that and in his narration, Imam Malik rahimahullah, he mentioned a portion of that. So this hadith, somewhat of other things that are mentioned in the hadith, but when he mentioned Imam Malik rahimahullah, when he mentioned his hadith, he only mentioned this portion of the hadith. Then also the hadith can be, you have others who have narrated this particular hadith. Then they mentioned that, so in other books that have covered this hadith, that they have mentioned that this hadith, it is narrated mursal, and also in some narration, mawsulan. As for those who have narrated the hadith, mursala, with a incomplete isnad, they mention Imam Malik in his book Muwatta, also Abdul Razak in his book Al-Musannif, also Ad-Daraqutni wal Bayhaqi. So these sources of hadith that they have narrated the hadith with a broken isnad, mursala. Others who have narrated the same hadith but also with a complete chain, or this hadith with a complete chain that will go back to the Prophet ﷺ with a complete chain, they mention, as mentioned by Ibn Hajar, An-Nasa'i wasalahu, but the narration in Nasa'i, it does not mention. So this hadith mentioned by Nasa'i rahimullah in his book Al-Mujtaba, As-Sunan Al-Sughra, when he mentioned this hadith, he mentioned a complete chain, but without mentioning this portion, this sentence that is mentioned here. So what is mentioned here regarding أن لا يمس القرآن إلا طاهر, that is not mentioned in the narration in An-Nasa'i in As-Sunan Al-Kubra, but he mentioned the full isnad regarding other matters relating to this hadith or other portion of this hadith, but without mentioning this particular statement of what is mentioned here. But also others who have narrated hadith with a complete chain, Ibn Hibban, also Daraqutni, and the ulama, they disagree between themselves, the ulama of hadith. Is this hadith, what's the appropriate ruling to be given to this hadith? Is this hadith, so what's the appropriate ruling to be given to this particular hadith? So the lengthy discussion that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, to the extent that he mentioned, wa ma'lul. So ma'lul is of those terminology again that used by the ulama of hadith concerning hadith fi illah, and what is meant by this concerning that the hadith al-ma'lul, that what kind of somewhat indicating, as the ulama does, there's a reason, that is that the hadith as a hidden defect that blocks the hadith from being graded as authentic. So it's a hidden defect that is found in the hadith that will be a reason to rule the hadith to be not authentic, to be daif. So that's concerning al-illah. So al-illah, or السبب خفي قادة في صحة الحديث. So it's a hidden defect that will bar or stop or will cause the hadith to be graded as weak. So they mentioned that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah kind of somewhat indicate that there's a ma'lul because of the difference between the ulama. So as for the aqwal of the ulama, and they said the reason behind why this hadith is said to be daif, a lengthy discussion, but they mentioned that the reason that one of the narrators in the isnad was Hakam ibn Musa. So Al-Hakam ibn Musa, that he made an error where he narrated the hadith by saying Sulaiman ibn Dawood. So one of the narrators that he narrated upon, he mentioned Sulaiman in the isnad, Sulaiman ibn Dawood. So he made an error and he mentioned Sulaiman ibn Dawood, but instead the correct name of the person in the isnad is Sulaiman ibn Arqam. So they mentioned that as sawab, Sulaiman ibn Arqam. So Sulaiman ibn Arqam is the actual narrator, but he was mentioned as Sulaiman ibn Dawood. So an error occurred, and the error occurred by Al-Hakam ibn Musa. So they said that this narrator, Sulaiman ibn Arqam, as for what is known for him regarding Al-Jar wa Ta'dil, is mentioned regarding Matruk al-Hadith. His hadith is considered to be a very weak narrator. So his hadith are dismissed. So Sulaiman ibn Arqam is the actual narrator, but there was an error made by one of the narrator, who was Al-Hakam ibn Musa, where he changed the name of Sulaiman ibn Arqam to Sulaiman ibn Dawood. As for Sulaiman Dawood, that I mentioned is Khawlani, and he generally concerned the ulama that they owe him to be a person of standing. He is held to be a narrator of standing, a thika, ma'mun. So he's considered to be a person who's a narrator who's outstanding. So that's a brief discussion regarding the hadith and the reason. As for the aqwal of the ulama on this hadith, regarding what they have stated regarding hadith, so you find that the likes of Abu Dawood as-Sajistani rahimullah, he mentioned هذا وهم من حكم, that Al-Hakam have made an error regarding this particular hadith. Then they mentioned so you said that, so, and we mentioned that Hakam is a person who's spoken about. He's considered to be a weak narrator. So they have criticized the hadith due to the error of Hakam, where they mentioned, and Sulaiman ibn Arqam and Zuhri. So Sulaiman ibn Arqam is a very weak narrator. So that's of the issues that relates to the hadith. Also they mentioned that of the ulama who have spoken ill of the hadith, that they have mentioned that Abu Zur al-Damashqi, he said, spoke also, clarified that also an error occur where Sulaiman ibn Arqam is the actual narrator, and also others have said something similar. So Al-Hafid ibn Manda also have said something similar, and also that even Nasa'i rahimullah also point out this error. So it shows regarding concerning that, then they mentioned that Sulaiman ibn Arqam matruk al-hadith, as stated by An-Nasa'i. So it shows that this hadith, regarding that it has some errors. Then also of the ulama who hold the hadith to be mursal. So of the ulama who have graded the hadith to be hadith al-mursal, that you find several of the ulama of hadith that they have graded this hadith to be mursal. So of those who hold the hadith to be mursal, they mention Darakutni, regarding that all the hadith to be, and they mention that all the hadith to be mursal, also Imam Malik and others. Then also they have mentioned regarding concerning that Al-Bayhaqi, that also this hadith of different narrate of other, they said shawa'id. So also this hadith, so the hadith, it has other companions other than what is mentioned here, that have narrated hadith that is similar. They refer to those as shawa'id. So at times it will refer to, as we find other narrators or sahaba are narrating a similar hadith, then they refer to them as shawa'id. So you find, so amongst those other companions who have narrated this hadith, they'll say that the original hadith that has been mentioned here, it is criticized and considered to be weak, but there's other narrations that carry the same meaning. They mention regarding concerning other narration of this hadith or turq of this hadith, that you have the likes of Uthman ibn al-As, who have also narrated this hadith in the Tabarani in Kabir. Also Ibn Umar have narrated this hadith also in the Al-Bayhaqi. Also Hakim ibn Hizam also have narrated this hadith from Darakutni, all going back to the Prophet ﷺ. So you'll find other companions who have narrated this hadith. We have Uthman ibn As, Ibn Umar, Hakim ibn Hizam, all of those are narrated the hadith where they mention upon the Prophet Islam, when they mention La yamas al-Quran illa tahir, but they mention that all these other isnad, that they're weak. So all those other narrations of the hadith, they are also criticized. But even though it says so of the ulama who have concluded hadith it is authentic or hasan, based upon, they say, majmu' at-turuq. All these narrations, which are about 4 different narrations of the hadith, they said all compile or all placed together, that they give strength, yanjabar, they kind of somewhat strengthen each other to the extent, so even though individually each narration is said to be weak, but when they're placed together, bundled together, then they give strength to each other. So they mentioned that some of the ulama at times, those based upon this, that they'll grade the hadith in overall, that they say the hadith in general, the hadith overall is considered to be hasan li ghayri, based upon the various narrations, even though all separately, independently, they are weak, but when they are stacked together, they give strength to each other. So others mention al-hadith hasan bi majmu' turuqihi, and we'll find lack of contemporary Shaykh Albani and others who have authentic hadith. But overall, we said it's not a discussion regarding that particular hadith. Also, they have mentioned some of the aqwal of the ulama regarding that some of the ulama has mentioned that have somewhat strengthened hadith based upon other factors. So of other statement of the hadith that they have mentioned, Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah qal, regarding this hadith, huwa kitab mashhur, that is hadith and what it contains as a letter, it is something which is mashhur in the ahli sir, amongst the ulama of seerah, ma'ruf ma fihi in the ahli al-ilm, that it is well known as to what it contained by the ulama of the ulama, ma'rifatun yastagni bi shuhratiha, where because of what it contained, and it is well known amongst the ulama that it's the hadith being well known to most of the ulama, common to most of the ulama, then it kind of somewhat, they mentioned that yastagni, it doesn't require the isnad, looking at the isnad. It doesn't require looking at isnad, or so it will give precedent of it being known amongst the ulama, that will take precedent over what is discussed regarding the isnad. So that's concerning what is mentioned by some. They mention لأنه أشبه تواتر في مجيئي, that it kind of somewhat, it is similar to hadith that come with many narrations from out of been sourced. Then I mention فتلقى لتلقى الناس يعني العلماء له بالقبول والمعرفة, where the ulama that they have somewhat accepted this hadith with his weakness regarding the isnad, so they have accepted this hadith and have taken to it. Then also you'll find others who have mentioned regarding, and also Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah qal, Kitab al-Ma'a Omar ibn Hazm ma'ruf inda al-ulama, that is hadith is well known amongst the ulama, وما فيه, and what is in it, فمتفق عليه إلا قليل, that and that most in it is somewhat agreed upon except for a small bit, except for a few. So also Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah also after the same, that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, that also of the same mindset regarding that, as mentioned regarding concerning that this hadith somewhat is mashhur mustafid in the ahli al-ilm, that hadith is well known between the ulama and somewhat have been accepted and used by the ulama. So accepted and used by the ulama. So that's some of what has been mentioned, and even Ahmad ibn Hanbal have said something. So aqwal of the ulama regarding their level of acceptance of this hadith, not based upon the isnad, but based upon its level of notoriety amongst the ulama, or its being known amongst the ulama. So most of the ulama, they have somewhat accept the hadith, not based upon the isnad, but based upon its content, based upon the wording and what contained inside of the hadith. So as for Amr ibn Hazm, or Amr ibn Hazm ibn Zayd Khazraji al-Ansari, Sahabi al-Jalil, Shahida, that he participated in al-Conduct of the Battle of Conduct and what came after, and that the Prophet ﷺ, that he used him concerning a person of one as a governor or to be in charge regarding Ahl Najran. So he was placed over the people of Najran, and also known for his tafaqquh, that he was known as now, and it was also for him to go and to teach the people regarding ad-deen, also, and the Quran, and also for him to also regarding a sadaqah, him responsible regarding the collection of the sadaqah from the people. And this they mention, ذلك في سنة العشر, that was in the 10th year of the Hijrah, that answer the Prophet ﷺ, he wrote him this letter that contained certain ahkam regarding as-sunan, was-sadaqat, wal-fara'id, wal-diyat. So the Prophet ﷺ gave him, so certain thing was written for him and given to him regarding thing for him to take to this area of Najran, so as thing to teach the people and to explain to the people. So that letter that I mentioned, وَكِتَابٌ طَوِيل, is a letter which is somewhat long, lengthy. Then the full length of the hadith can be found in the books of Al-Hakim, which is Al-Mustadrak lil-Hakim. The full letter maybe can be found. Also Al-Bayhaqi and others who have tried to collect the full length of the hadith regarding what is contained inside this letter that was given to Amr ibn Azim in him going to being sent to Al Najran regarding teaching them and explaining to them and being the one to look over and overseas regarding collection of sadaqah. So that hadith, that can be a discussion regarding concerning that things being written by the Prophet ﷺ regarding hadith. So some hadith being written by the Prophet ﷺ or being overseen by the Prophet ﷺ regarding things being recorded and being taken by the Sahaba to other places to teach the people what is contained within that letter. Then they mention regarding concerning what the meaning of the hadith, that mention Allah yamas, yani concerning that person touching with his hand without any type of partition. So the person directly touching something, al-mas, is directly touching something with the hand without any type of partition in between. Then it mentioned Al-Quran, concerning that Quran that is being intended, which is we have Quran and then also Kalam Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we have Al-Mushaf. So the Mushaf is what the Quran is contained with it, and also other things. So the Quran, the Mushaf, it contains the Quran, Kalam Allah, written on pages, and also you have the covers, and also so that's concerning Al-Mushaf. Illa Tahir, and to be discussed regarding a Tahir, one who is pure. So none to touch the Quran except At-Tahir. That the Prophet ﷺ used the word Al-Quran, not Mushaf, as in the time of the Sahaba, that what was predominant in regarding concerning the Quran, that not in the form of a Mushaf, so they write the Quran on leaves and parches and different things. From that time, the Quran was somewhat being recorded, so the Quran was in present, and they had the Quran in written form to some during that time of the Prophet ﷺ, and then it becomes more formal regarding in a form of a book. In the time of Uthman ibn Affan, it became more formal, and for the formality become finalized in the time of Uthman ibn Affan, Ta'ala anhu. So from the time of so during before then, some effort regarding compiling the Quran, those efforts were already in progress. Those efforts were already in progress. But then Uthman anhu finalized regarding codifying the Quran and that master copy being used by the Muslim from then onwards. So regarding concerning the ahkam that can be taken from this particular hadith. So the ahkam that can be taken from this particular hadith, of those matters that are discussed regarding the ahkam regarding this particular hadith. So the hadith discuss the mawdu' of this hadith is to discuss, is it allowed for one, or is it allowed for one to touch the mushaf except in a state of tahara? So is it required for one in touching the Quran or the mushaf, in touching the mushaf, one must be in a state of tahara? So that will be after discussion that relates to this matter. So the person who is not in a state of tahara, the person who does not have wudu, is he or she allowed to touch the Quran, touch the mushaf? So as for that masala, so amongst other masail, the different issues to be covered regarding this hadith, of those issues first, mas al-mushaf ala ghayri tahara, or is it allowed for one to touch the Quran or touch the mushaf or carry the mushaf while one is not in a state of tahara? So the person is without wudu. and haven't yet renewed their wudu. Is such a person allowed to touch the mushaf or to carry the mushaf? So on this matter, we have a khilaf between the ulama, or what is stated regarding the matter. You find that jumhur of the ulama, jumhur al-ilm, majority of the ulama, and amongst that jumhur, we have al-Shafi'i, Ahmad, Malik, Ashab al-Rahi, regarding the Ahnaf, that they take the position, Adam al-Jawaz, it is not allowed for one to touch the mushaf except in a state of tahara. So one is not allowed to touch or carry the mushaf except in a state of tahara. That's the position taken by Jumhur ulama, where the person in a state of tahara regarding as-sugra ahdat, as-sugra or kubra. So the person in a state of major impurity or minor impurity is not allowed to carry nor touch the Quran. That's the position taken by Jumhur of the ulama, and amongst them A'immat al-Arba. So amongst them A'immat al-Arba. Also added to that list of the ulama who take this position, Al-Hasan al-Basri, Ata, Tawus, Al-Shabi, Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad, and others. Then Ibn Umar, they're very cautious regarding that matter, and also some mention regarding some of the Sahaba, that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Salman al-Farisi, of those also inclined towards that position. So Ibn Umar, Sa'd ibn Waqqas, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, and also Salman al-Farisi, of those among the Sahaba who were inclined towards that position. And the evidence, so that's concerning those who take this position, of the evidence that they use, they mention regarding concerning evidence from the Quran and also evidence from the Sunnah. So evidence from the Sunnah, the hadith that we have just mentioned, that la yamassa al-Quran illa tahir. So it's very straightforward. But as we mentioned, there's a discussion regarding the authenticity or the grading of the hadith, where the hadith is somewhat disputed regarding its authenticity. Then I mentioned, as by way of the Sunnah, so they use the hadith, they mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, la yamassahu illa mutahharun. So none, la tamassahu, that none to touch it, illa, except those that are pure. So they mentioned that, so in this ayat in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, that is being discussed as to what is intended regarding none to touch, and I mentioned la yamassahu, so the damir goes back to the Quran or to Allahul Mahfuz. And I mentioned that our next discussion, so you have a discussion regarding as to what is intended regarding what not to be touched, and also those who are exempted. So I mentioned regarding concerning, so you have that discussion between the ulama on this matter. So I mentioned that mutahharun, as in this ayah, those who mentioned that what is intended are the angels. So regarding concerning what is intended are the angels, but those who mentioned that regarding that the Quran above, or the Muslim that is above, that is being spoken of the Quran above, as for, or the Lawh al-Mahfuz which is above, and mutatahharun, that they are the angels. And those who mention that applies to those above, but also underground, on the earth, then that apply to those who are mankind regarding Bani Adam, that if they choose to touch the Quran, they also should be in a state of tahara. That's concerning those who take this position regarding using this as an evidence. So you have a khilaf regarding who is intended by al-Mushaf, or la yamassahu, al-Damir goes back to al-Quran or Kitab Maknoon, or mutatahharun, who is intended, the angels or Bani Adam. So you have that discussion between the ulama. Ibn Qudama rahimahullah al-Hanbali, he mentioned la na'lam lahum mukhalafa, meaning we do not know of them, min sahaba, of anyone going against them, or the ulama, we do not know of anyone going against the ulama on this matter regarding the position taken by Jumhur, illa Dawood yani al-Zahiri, except for Dawood al-Zahiri, that he takes, we mention فَإِنَّهُ أَبَاهَ مَسَّهُ, where Dawood al-Zahiri, he takes the position that it is allowed for one to touch the Quran, carry the Quran outside a state of tahara. That's the position taken by Dawood al-Zahiri. He says that now majority of the ulama, A'immat al-Arba, and many others take an opposite position. Then I mentioned that so that's concerning, so of those, so the second opinion, as mentioned by Ibn Qudama, is that taken by Dawood al-Zahiri. Then I mentioned that, so of those who mentioned that to strengthen the view of Jumhur, that of the Sahaba who have taken the position, and there's no known Sahaba that contradict them, who take a different position. So that's like a ijma between the Sahaba, that they all that they somewhat more tacitly take to that opinion. So that's concerning that. So we find that the second opinion was the second opinion of Dawood al-Zahiri. Also, those who agree with Dawood al-Zahiri regarding this position, they mentioned also Ibn Hazm. Also, they mentioned Hamad. Also, Abu Razin. Also, Muhammad ibn Sirin. So you find others other than Dawood actually take this position. So not just Dawood al-Zahiri, but you find others who also take a line to the position that it is allowed for a person that is not in a state of tahara to carry the Quran and also to touch the Mus'haf, to carry the Mus'haf and to touch the Mus'haf. So the matter really is a matter of khilaf between the ulama on those two opinions. You find that of contemporaries, so you find others of the ulama who have discussed the matter, and many have discussed the matter of those who are also that aligned to the view of Jumhur of the ulama. We find Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah aligned to the view of Jumhur of the ulama, also Sheikh bin Baz rahimahullah, and also Ibn Uthaymeen of contemporaries, and also of those who are, and also Sheikh Saleh Fawzan, also they are of the view that they align to the view of Jumhur of the ulama, where one is not allowed to touch the Quran except in a state of tahara. So that's concerning this matter regarding that a khilaf between the ulama regarding is it allowed for one to touch the Quran without being in a state of tahara, or carry the Quran in a outside the state of, also not being in a state of tahara. So when we discuss Jumhur, including A'immat al-Arba, say no, one is not allowed, but we find those of the ulama who take the position that it is allowed. And you find of Mu'asir, those others who somewhat align to that view. So overall, the matter of discussion between the ulama on this matter. Then the next matter that is discussed regarding if the Mus'haf, it is like covered or in a is covered or wrapped. So the Quran is wrapped, the Mus'haf is wrapped in with paper, it is wrapped in cloth, it is in a box, a container. Then to carry the Quran like that, then it doesn't require tahara. So the Quran, if it is carried or the Mus'haf is in such a container or wrapped in this fashion, then it does not require tahara for it to be carried. It doesn't require tahara for it to be carried. And that's the position taken by of the ulama. Position that is allowed for one to carry it in that. And that's the view that is taken by Abu Hanifa, Ahmed, Hamad, Hakam, and many others, At-Tawus al-Hasan, that it is permissible if the Quran is in something, or the Mus'haf, then it can be carried, even though others that says it is not to be done. The next matter regarding Al-Mus'haf, or Quran, thing of the Quran, that we at times might find that books, that Quran being like books of tafsir, or books of fiqh, or books of hadith, or books, Islamic books, we might find Quran ayat is mentioned or mentioned within those books. So in more so regarding books of tafsir, books of fiqh, books of hadith, where you find Quran is mentioned. So a book in tafsir, at times you'll find that the Quran is in a corner, and then the tafsir around it, or at the top, and tafsir explanation is mentioned below. So those books, it has the Quran, a portion of the Quran, but tafsir, or the entire Quran, but there's other things mentioned along with the Quran. Are those books, is it required for a person to carry that book, to touch such books of tafsir, the books of fiqh, books of hadith? Does the person need to be in a state of tahara? As the position taken by Jumhur. They mentioned regarding concerning this matter that, as mentioned by Ibn Qudam rahimahullah, يجوز مس كتب التفسير والفقه وغيرها, that it's permissible for one to touch or carry, would be also carry books of tafsir, books of fiqh, and other books of hadith and the likes, ورسائل, and also like letters, وإن كان فيها آيات من القرآن, even if it contains ayah from the Quran. Then they mentioned that Abdalil, that they mentioned the Dalil, mentioned with Dil Nabi alayhi salam kataba ila Qaisar kitaban fi ayat. The Prophet that he wrote a letter to Qaisar, and what was written in that letter, it also contained that letter contained verses, was also contained in that letter that was written. So normal things were mentioned in the letter of dawah, that person being invited to Islam, but also Quran ayat was also mentioned. So they mentioned that as a proof, and it didn't require concerning tahara. It did not require tahara. So they said on that matter, then it is allowed regarding carrying and touching books of hadith, books of tafsir that contains Quran, is allowed for a person to touch them without being a state of tahara. Then a matter that is, they also discuss that if a person, adam al-ma, that if there's no water present, for those who take the position regarding that those who take the position the person should be in a state of tahara, if the person does not in a state of the person not in a state of tahara, and they wish to carry the Quran, but they do not have any water, what to be done in that case? Well, they mentioned a person wish to read the Quran in that case, they do not have water, access to water to perform wudu, but wish to carry the Quran, then such a person should perform tayammum. That one should perform tayammum, then they are allowed to carry the mushaf or to touch the mushaf. That's concerning of those matters that I mentioned regarding this matter. Another matter that is discussed, that in today's time we have concerning our phones and iPads, and also a person can download the Quran onto these phones or computers. They mentioned that does the person to carry his phone around, but in it he has a Quran as one of the what is on it, then of one of the app that is on it, does the person need to be in a state of tahara? The ulama mentioned that's not the case, as mentioned by Sheikh Fawzan and others that are discussed this contemporary matter, that a person does not, regarding concerning the person having as an app the Quran, that the person doesn't need tahara to carry that regarding that phone, he doesn't need to be in a state of tahara. Then also they discussed regarding concerning Imam Malik rahimullah, he mentioned al-fuqaha al-malikiyya raqasu fi surah ta'lim, regarding concerning in the cases of ta'lim, teaching of the Quran, that they mentioned that. So in the cases of teaching of the Quran, the ulama of the Malikiyya, they mentioned that they have raqasu, that they give some leniency. So they're giving some leniency regarding in the cases of teaching of the Quran and learning the Quran, as they all mentioned that, for they give some permissibility for one who's teaching and learn the Quran, that a person does not have to constantly be in a state of tahara. So that's the so for the muallim or muta'allim, for the person, the teacher, and also for the student in teaching of Quran, that they give some leniency where the teacher and the student does not have to be in the state of tahara all times. So they said, now if the person have lost his wudu and he wish to continue the lesson, then it is allowed. They give some allowance regarding that, as I mentioned, فَحَالَةَ تَعَلُّمْ فِي مَثْلِ الْقُرْآنِ عَلَى غَيْرِ طَهَارَةٍ, that they give some permissibility for the person to do that regarding while they are learning the Quran, that to carry the Quran, to touch the Quran, that as in the lesson the person is allowed to do so, even if they are not ala ghayru tahara, even if they are not in a state of tahara. They mention lihajatihim, as people, because of the need that they need ila tikrar al-mas, because they need to constantly be touching and carrying the Quran. So they mention it is allowed, and also al-mashaqqa al-wudu, and also it becomes difficult for a person always to be constantly making wudu all the time. So they give some leniency on this matter. Then I mentioned that barakasu lil muta'allim. So they mentioned that they give that permissibility regarding that for the teacher and the students regarding allowance that they can be without tahara to carry and to touch the Quran. But I mentioned that wahadi rukhsa. So the Shaykh mentioned wahadi rukhsa. As for this particular leniency that they have given, عندهم خاصة, that they have given regarding, that they have given, they mentioned it as خاصة بحال الدرس والحفظ وتعلم. It's only in the case regarding, it's in a lesson or a person memorizing or teaching. So it should be in a lesson scenario, so they only give this concession only in lesson regarding, it's a lesson taking place at dars, or hif, the person memorizing the Quran, or ta'allum, or the person learning the Quran, teaching the Quran, that I mentioned, وَلَيْسَ لِأَجْلِ تِلَاوَةِ ta'abbud, but it's not in the case of the person wish to read the Quran as a form of tilawa. So the person want to sit and to read the Quran, then the person is not given, according to the Malikiyah, is not allotted this concession only in case of teaching and learning and memorizing. The person is allowed to touch the Quran without being in a state of tahara. So those are some of the masail that relates to this particular discussion between the ulama. Another thing the ulama mentioned regarding jumhur of the ulama, that they see that it is not allowed for a person to carry the Quran or to touch the Quran, whereas the complete Quran or a portion of the Quran. As we all know concerning that, and also might add it that books that are said to be translation of the Quran, books that are translation of the Quran, then those book translation is not Quran. Translation is not Quran. So those books also, they'll fall in the category concerning the translations of the Quran. At times, you might find it as the Quran and also the translation. So those books will fall in the category regarding books that they'll mention that it fall in the category regarding books of tafsir. Then another, you find books that are said to be translation of the Quran, that is only translation and no Quran. Then those books, then it doesn't require tahara at all. Doesn't require anything. So that's concerning those cases regarding books that may contain Quran and other things. Then the ruling is somewhat different. So as we mentioned previous, with this inshallah ta'ala, will come to an end regarding this particular lesson, regarding the 11th hadith in this the 11th hadith on the topic of Nawaqil al-Wudu in the book Bulugh al-Maram by Hafid ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah. So inshallah ta'ala we'll end lesson with this. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة الحمد لله. How long was that one?